Let's quack-a-lackin'. This week we are right back at the McKennan Park on the south side of Sioux Falls. If you watched last week, we took a walking tour of the McKennan Park Historic District, which surrounds this park, and it only made sense to come back to the park this week because not only is there a shared overlapping history, but there are a lot of things of historical significance that are specific just to the park itself, aside from the neighborhood. And in fact, my very first time in this park, I discovered a historical mystery of monumental significance, and it's never left my thoughts ever since then. So I wanted to share it with you because I feel like this is something that's going to be a journey of discovery that takes place over time. And hopefully, with all of us collectively working on this, maybe we can actually solve this mystery. But before we jump into McKennan Park, let me just show you this guy right here. Check him out. So this statue is called the Potato Man. I'm not sure what year it was installed in the park, but it says that the sculptor is a lady named Susan Geissler. And the Potato Man is here to represent the Irish immigrants that really helped to develop Sioux Falls in the early days. And in fact, it was one of those Irish immigrants that this park and the neighborhood that surrounds the park is named after, Miss Helen McKennan. McKennan Park officially opened in 1908 as the first park in the city of Sioux Falls, and there are a number of old world park features here that really make you feel like you've stepped back in time when you come here, and one of them is this bandshell behind me. Although this is the oldest bandshell in the city of Sioux Falls today, it's actually not the first one. There was originally on this very spot in McKennan Park, there was a different bandshell that was constructed in 1918. And in fact, on Sunday, July 11th, 1920, the city's municipal band played their very first concert at this location on the original bandshell, and thousands of people came to see that performance. So much so that the city's Cosmopolitan Club led a project to expand on this experience and to really bring the municipal band into the forefront of the community structure, the fabric of Sioux Falls. And so they did a fundraising effort and built this new bandshell, which was commenced on July 4th, 1926. It was the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and more than 10,000 people came here to McKennan Park to watch the municipal band play in that performance. Now, you can still catch performances on this bandshell even today. Throughout the warmer months of the year, there will often be plays, children's performances performed during the daytime here in the park. And on Monday afternoons, local bands will use this bandshell to give free performances, typically to an audience of hundreds of people who just bring out lawn chairs and sit here in the shade of the trees and enjoy some free local music. The city's municipal band does still play, but they play on weekends, I believe on Saturdays, at the Bandshell at Terrace Park. Come here to McKennan Park on Mondays and Terrace Park on Saturdays. You'll get free music all summer long. I really have a soft spot for these bandshells because they take me back to when I lived in the Ozark Mountains of northern Arkansas. I was raised in central Arkansas, and I spent a good year up in the Ozarks of the northern part of the state. And there was a town there called Yellville that during the warm months, during the summer and early fall, they would have every weekend a free community concert on the town square circling the courthouse. And they would have a stage set up with local bands that would come and play, and pretty much everyone in town would come out. There would be vendors there selling their wares. It was the first place in my life I ever tried goat milk, and it was absolutely delicious. And it was just a unique, folksy, back home type of experience. And the bandshells in the parks here in Sioux Falls really take me back to that experience, just a little differently and a little more sophisticated. But as much as I like the bandshells, it's really the horseshoe pits here behind me. Ooh, the sun is glaring. I got to break that habit. But it's these horseshoe pits that really make me feel like I've stepped back in time when I come here to McKennan Park. There are 18 different horseshoe pits here at McKennan Park. These horseshoe pits were originally installed in 1921, so they've been a feature at this park for more than a century. How many horseshoes do you suppose were pitched during that time? And another interesting feature is right next to the horseshoe pits. Ooh, if we can spin around and get over here to the sidewalk. Look, it's just endless horseshoes. Right next to the horseshoe pits, they have shuffleboard. And horseshoes and shuffleboard during the teens, the 20s, and the 1930s, those were really in-demand, high-class features for any park. And it's something that we really don't see in modern parks anymore. But for this to be here in this park tells you that this was a really happening place even back in its day. And although I can tell you that the horseshoes were installed here in 1921, there's no record as to when the shuffleboard courts were installed, but it was probably roughly around the same time period during the early 1920s. Now, while no one's out here playing horseshoes today, don't let that mislead you. These horseshoe pits are in constant use here at McKennan Park. And in fact, there are horseshoe tournaments that are played here at the park. So if you like to pitch horseshoes and you feel like you're good enough to do it competitively, McKennan Park is a place to come try your luck. Now, if you think back to last week's video when we toured the McKennan Historic District surrounding this park, I told you that the origins of this park were that when Miss Helen McKennan passed in 1906, she willed her home and 20 acres of land to the city of Sioux Falls with the expressed intent of developing a park for the citizens, because Sioux Falls had no park at that time and she wanted to gift one to the people that lived here. Now, it's typically just not enough, unfortunately, to leave that sort of thing in your will and leave it up to the paperwork to carry things through. You need someone who will work on your behalf after you're gone to see your vision through to completion. And Miss McKennan found that person in a man named Edward Sherman. And Edward Sherman was instrumental to the overall development of the park system here in Sioux Falls, because even before Miss McKennan gave her property to develop this first park, he already had a vision of a city park system consisting of multiple parks all across all the different neighborhoods that existed in town and would exist in town. And he envisioned these things coming under the control of a parks council or a parks board that would be a part of the city government. And he was very outspoken in his support of this idea. And so at the time that Helen McKennan decided that she wanted the property to become a park, it was only natural for her to approach Edwin Sherman and enlist his help in this endeavor. In last week's video, as I cut across the park, I quickly showed you a shot of this bust of what Helen McKennan looked like. This is a sculpture by an artist named Martin Wencerski, and this sculpture was added to the park in 2008, and there is an inscription below it that says that Helen Gale McKennan was an early pioneer and land speculator in Sioux Falls, and that she recognized the need for city parks, so she donated her home and the adjacent 20 acres for what has now become known as McKennan Park. And we talked about this story a little bit more last week, but she was an amazing woman who left some incredible gifts to this city, so I just wanted to document another piece of her legacy in this video as well. Mr. Sherman did not wait until the park opened in 1908 to begin bringing this vision to life. After Miss McKennan passed in 1906, he started his initial development of this property into the park that we know today. And one of the first things that Edwin Sherman did was he went across this 20 acres and planted elm trees and walnut trees in abundance, which is what gives this park such a shaded atmosphere today. And unfortunately, as I told you last week, in 1961, this whole region of the country suffered this plague of Dutch elm disease, and across the entire Midwest, a large number of trees met their end at the hands of a chainsaw, and it was just an unfortunate thing that had to be done to prevent this disease from spreading to other trees. So a lot of those trees were lost, but not all of them were. So when you come here to McKennan Park and you look at some of the older elm trees and walnut trees that are here still today, I want you to understand that these trees were planted by hand by Edwin Sherman himself in memory of Miss McKennan, and as part of his effort to see both her vision of the city's first park as well as his vision of a larger branching park system. Seeing both of those visions come to life, and these trees are where all of that started. So keep that in mind if you're fortunate enough to be able to come out here to McKennan Park. You know things are bad when even the birds are facing a housing crisis. Now, I just wanted to quickly interject that Edwin Sherman also has his own park here in town. Sioux Falls is a city full of parks. There are more than 70 parks here in Sioux Falls, and one of them is named after Edwin Sherman. It's Sherman Park over on the corner of 12th and Kiwanis. And it's where you will find both the Great Plains Zoo and the memorial to the USS South Dakota, which saw a lot of action during World War II. And we'll definitely go take a look at that memorial one day. One of the more popular features at McKennan Park, at least for small children, is the wading pool. This wading pool has been a standard feature at this park since 1929, but it's gone through a couple of revisions at the park. The original wading pool was constructed in 1929 and had some features such as I'm not sure if it was a whale or a dolphin, but it had something spraying water out of its mouth. But due to just the use over the decades, it became dated. So in about 2005, I want to say, they renovated the wading pool and updated it. And they have since done that again. The wading pool that you see here today, this is the very first year after the most recent renovation. So all of this is a brand new park feature here today, continuing on a historic tradition from the early days of McKennan Park. While the wading pool is certainly the most popular spot for families with small children, this is my particular favorite spot within McKennan Park. It's right at the side entrance on 2nd Avenue, and this is what you call the Pillars of the Nation, and this is actually a very cool little monument. The Pillars of the Nation were conceived by a man named Oscar Ellefson, who was the caretaker of the park and the curator of many of the park's earliest features. And what he did was in 1940, he wrote to the governors of all 48 states. That's right, I said all 48 states. Remember, this is 1940. Alaska and Hawaii were not yet part of the United States at this time. So Mr. Ellefson wrote to the governors of all 48 states and requested that each of them send stones to represent their local state. And they did. Every state governor in the United States sent Mr. Ellefson a box of stones native and indigenous to their location. And those stones were then used to create the Pillars of the Nation. The two central pillars are made mostly of fossils and artifacts collected in the South Dakota area by a man named Emil Christensen, who collected all of these artifacts and donated them for this project. I'm not sure if the camera will pick up just how much this one glistens in the sun, but these were original constructions, and they were updated in 1999 to add these light fixtures to the top. Those were not original. And then the two smaller pillars on the side are made up of stones from all 48 states. And I find this one interesting because in Minnesota, they have the red catlinite pipestone from the Pipestone National Monument fashioned into the shape of a sacred pipe. If you want to learn more about this, we went there a few weeks ago. I will leave a link up in the top for more about the pipestone video. But I found my home state in here as well. If you come across over here to this other pillar, and believe me, unless you're from Alaska or Hawaii, your home state is represented in these pillars as well. So come here and check it out. But my home state of Arkansas is represented right here. And I'm really surprised that there is not a crystal in this, because Arkansas is really known for its crystals. If the sun was catching it right, you could see that this is a piece of quartz, which is what the crystal is formed from. But what is really, really interesting about this is this stone right here. This is a stone known as bauxite, which is incredibly soft. And bauxite is found in only one place in the entire world, and that is the tiny town of Bauxite, Arkansas, population around 600. It's the only place in the entire world this stone is found. So yeah, that's the representation from my home state of Arkansas, and your state is certainly represented here as well. As for Mr. Ellefson, as I said, he was the caretaker of all of the original things that were situated inside this park. And it's important to talk about a couple of those, because we've talked about some of the historic things that are still here in the park. And we've talked about, for example, the wading pool, how that was an original fixture that has been revamped multiple times over time, but it's still here today. But there are also some fixtures of this park that are no longer here today, and they are part of the story. So I want to tell you about a couple of them in particular. mostly because that's what leads us into the mystery. You remember at the beginning of the video, I told you that there is a mystery here of monumental proportion, and indeed there is. So we are finally getting to that. One of those original park features was a miniature rock city that park employees built together on their own. And they just gathered a lot of stones from the local area, and they built this miniature town with a mountain terrain. And there was a model train that would drive around this mountain and through the town. And for whatever reason, neighborhood children really loved to come here and go to that miniature village and just watch this train drive around. They could watch it endlessly. And that's a feature that unfortunately is no longer here. And this park has always, even up until today, it's been known for its floral gardens. There's very beautiful flower arrangements here, unlike anywhere else in town. If you like to photograph flowers, McKennan Park is a good place to come for that. So because they've always been known for their floral gardens, at one time there were greenhouses here at the park where the plants were nurtured before they were planted out into the park. And this was a really appreciated feature because during the colder months of the year, it allowed people a warm place to get inside and still experience a little bit of nature and look at the beauty of flowers and plants, even during the cold winter months. And it's sad to say that those features are no longer here. And another one that was lost is in the very early days, this park had its own little miniature zoo, and it wasn't a big zoo in terms of the way we think of zoos today, but it had some deer and coyotes and a couple of examples of prairie animals that early pioneers would have expected to encounter in this area on a regular basis. The floral gardens at McKennan Park are absolutely spectacular and stunning. These flowers are a long-standing tradition at this park, but I wanted to just quickly show you these trees. Look how beautiful and amazing these trees are. I had told you that before the park was even officially opened, Edwin Sherman went through this area and planted a number of elm and walnut trees. And the tree planting has been a long-standing tradition here at McKennan Park. In fact, when the park first opened in 1908, it opened with a tree planting ceremony and the city's first live band performance inside a park. And this particular oak tree here is incredibly stunning. This tree was planted in 1922 by the Sioux Falls History Club, and it was planted in memory of all who had served during World War I. This is another example of a memorial tree planted here in McKennan Park. I'm not sure if this one is also from the World War I era or if it is closer to the World War II era, but there is a plaque that says that it was planted. It doesn't give the year, but it says it was planted by the National Women's Relief Corps. And what I find interesting is that the plaque at the base of this tree says that it was planted in honor of the Grand Army of the Republic. And that sounds so much fancier than just saying the Army. I think we should get back to that and just go back to referring to it as the Grand Army of the Republic. I couldn't very well make a video about McKennan Park without showing you at least a shot of the tennis courts. There are 8 different tennis courts here at McKennan Park, and these tennis courts were originally constructed in 1909, making them one of the oldest features still in use in this park. And even though they are empty at the moment, they are indeed used on a regular basis. In fact, they have various tennis tournaments, including high school tennis tournaments here at McKennan Park on a regular basis. Not only did the citizens of Sioux Falls plant trees to honor the memory of our veterans and fallen heroes, but in 1941 they also constructed a statue, which is really what leads us into the mystery of McKennan Park, because there is a very deep mystery here. At least to me, it is a very deep mystery that a lot of citizens in this town either aren't aware of or have just grown to overlook over time. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about it so that it doesn't get lost to time. But before I talk about that statue's mystery, I have to show you the Sunken Gardens. Just to quickly show you this marker, because I had talked about Edwin Sherman and how he was instrumental in carrying out Miss McKennan's plans to develop this park. And at the time that this park opened in 1908, he talked about the area and talked about the wide sweeping panoramic views of the surrounding prairie land. So if you think back to last week's video, I told you that this neighborhood was originally not really part of Sioux Falls. It was a very rural setting, and it was considered out in the country, and it was where people had their summer homes, because indeed this was all prairie land, and people remarked at how beautiful the views were from this area. But today it is surrounded by a historic neighborhood, so those views have been replaced with the views of beautiful homes. This sunken garden is one of the original features here at McKennan Park, and I really love the way the walls of the sunken garden are lined with countless dozens of hostas. Hostas are such beautiful plants. And then you have this just stunning and striking central flower arrangement. And just how often do you see a sunken garden like this in modern parks? It's absolutely beautiful. And to me, this is a place that is, usually whenever I come to the sunken garden, there may be someone walk through periodically, but for the most part, I have it to myself. So it's a very quiet enclave. It's a place where you can come and just enjoy quiet time and read, or put on your earbuds and listen to some music or what have you. Other people have historically, for decades, continuing into today, like to use this sunken garden as a backdrop for their wedding photos. And as you can imagine, this is very beautiful scenery to have your photograph taken in. As you transition out of the sunken gardens and come back up the stairs, we are led into the subject of the mystery here at McKennan Park. And that is this statue of Lady Liberty. I think a moment ago, I might have said that this statue was installed in 1941. And if I said that, I indeed misspoke. This statue actually came into being in 1942. And it was to bring a sense of morale to the community, because you have to remember that this is a time when World War II was still in its closing years, and a number of citizens had been gone fighting in that war for years, and some of them were never going to return. And the city needed a symbol to unite around, to make them feel patriotic and to instill hope in them. And the statue of Lady Liberty is what served that purpose. But the trippy thing is that this is not the original statue that was here at this location. And in fact, the original Lady Liberty statue has been missing since the 1960s. So the statue that is here today is actually a bronze replica of an earlier statue. This bronze replica was installed in, I want to say 2005, sometime in that time frame. But the original statue was installed here in the park in 1942, and that was actually a wood carving of Lady Liberty. But this was no ordinary wood carving. This was a very special wood carving of the Statue of Liberty. And what made it special was that this wood carving was owned by one of the early pioneers of this area, a man named Charles Sells. And I'm unsure of how specifically Charles Sells came to be in possession of this wooden carving, but the wooden carving of the Statue of Liberty that he had was actually a carving that was made by Frederick Bartholdi, the creator of the actual Statue of Liberty in New York City. He created this wooden carving first and used it as a model when creating the actual Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island in New York City. And so this wooden carving had a direct link to one of our national treasures. And in my view, that makes this statue itself one of our national treasures, because it is the model that the basis of the real statue was formed on. I never really noticed before that Lady Liberty has broken chains at her feet. Broken chains. If you were ever aware of that, let me know. I was today years old when I found that out. But she's absolutely beautiful. She is. So what happened was Charles Sells had owned this wooden carving of the Statue of Liberty for decades. And in the early 1940s, World War II was well underway, and the Sioux Falls Garden Club wanted to acquire that statue to make it a feature in this park that the public could come to see and enjoy. And so what they did was they organized a public subscription campaign to raise funds to purchase the statue. And there's no purchase amount listed in the historical records, so I'm unsure of how much they actually paid for the statue, but the citizens of the community all joined in on this subscription club service and raised the money to acquire this statue from Mr. Sells. Now, the Garden Club acquired this wooden carving of Lady Liberty in 1942 and immediately installed it in the park on this very same stone pedestal that's still here today, which matches the Pillars of the Nation. I think that this pedestal was built at the same time. But they installed the statue in 1942, but there was not an official commencement ceremony until August 1st, 1943. And at that time, the statue was unveiled and presented by local twins, Thelma and Elma Iverson. Now, in the years leading up to the end of World War II and in the years immediately following the end of the World War, that wooden Statue of Liberty was a point of morale for this community, particularly for families who had soldiers soon to be returning home or for soldiers who were just returning home. And in fact, in the years immediately following the end of World War II, it was sort of a local tradition for soldiers who were coming home from the war to bring their girl on a date here to McKennan Park, and you would take a stroll through these flower gardens and maybe stop in the Sunken Gardens for a moment just to enjoy the peace and quiet and tranquility. And then you would transition from the Sunken Gardens up to the Statue of Liberty and share a moonlight kiss to welcome your date home. So that was a local tradition here in town, and it was all centered around this wooden Statue of Liberty that was in fact the model for the actual Statue of Liberty in New York. But that's really where the story takes kind of a sad turn for that statue. If you think back to when we went to the Japanese gardens, I told you that for decades following the end of World War II, the Japanese gardens had become the subject of vandalism in the community, and how I found it peculiar that someone could go to war to fight to defend their country and then come home and just ravage it. And that very same thing happened here at McKennan Park, particularly with respect to the wooden Statue of Liberty, but really to many of the park features. And it's the whole reason why they're not here today. The tiny rock village that I told you about was just completely destroyed by vandals. The greenhouses had so much glass broken that they had to just be destroyed. And the wooden Statue of Liberty that was here sort of met the same fate. It was vandalized and carved on. And in addition to that, you have to understand that this was a very old wooden statue that had been allowed to sit out in the South Dakota winter for decades. And so the wood was never properly preserved or protected. And so it had deteriorated naturally, but it was really the vandalism that was the final straw. And it led to the city making the unfortunate decision to remove the statue from the park at some point in the 1960s. We're not sure the exact year, but sometime in the 1960s, the city removed the Statue of Liberty from the park. The real mystery here is what happened to that original Statue of Liberty when it was removed from the park? Because there's no official historic record to say what happened to that statue. There's not even an official historic record that says specifically what year it was removed. We only know that it was at some time in the 1960s. And the point in time is an important distinction to make, because before 1966, Sioux Falls had not yet found its sense of historic preservation. So if it happened in the early 1960s, there's a good chance that the statue was just disposed of with other park waste like tree branches and leaves and what have you. It would have just been disposed of the same way that so many historic buildings were disposed of during that time. But if it happened after 1966, then this was a point of change in the city's history. This was a point in time when historical preservation really became very important. And so if it was after 1966, there's a good chance that this statue still exists today and it's just lost in some old city storage locker, or perhaps in someone's garage laying under a tarp and they don't even know what it is that they have. So, and this is an important mystery to solve because, as I have now said a few times, this wooden Statue of Liberty that was once here at McKennan Park was the model. It was hand carved by the same artist and was the model that he used when he created the actual Statue of Liberty. And that makes this wooden carving not only a piece of art history, but a piece of our national history. And in a state that has monuments such as Mount Rushmore, you would think that it would be important to find and preserve this item, even if only fragments or remnants of it remain today. But no one has ever made the effort. They've always just assumed that the statue found its way into the city landfill or perhaps into a fireplace. And I certainly hope that's not the case. But it is also a very real possibility that we have to acknowledge. But all we know at this time is that the statue was removed sometime in the 1960s. The same stone pedestal remained there and sat empty for decades and was a source of sorrow for this community. For decades, people in this community asked the city to bring the statue back. And finally, in the early 2000s, they did bring back the bronze reproduction that we just saw today. And that's been there for a couple of decades now. But it's just not the same as having an authentic piece of both national history and art history here on display. And if that statue still exists today, then we need to find it because it needs to be encased in something that is climate controlled and humidity controlled so that this wood, whatever is left of it, can be preserved for as long as possible. Even though the wooden statue is long gone, it has had a lasting effect on the city's memory and as part of the legacy of the cultural identity of Sioux Falls. And in fact, the transition from the wooden statue to the bronze statue behind me has often been cited as an example of the shifting identity over time of not just Sioux Falls, but this neighborhood in specific, from an older time to a more modern age. And so it's often used as an example of transition, but it's still very sad to me that we don't know what happened to this wooden statue. And I would really like to find out, and there are a couple of leads to pursue, but all of them will take a little bit of time. One is the Parks and Recreation Department themselves, because they certainly have the longest standing and most detailed records of park refuse removal and disposal logs and things of that nature. So there may be some clues buried in there. And the Siouxland Heritage Museums are definitely the authorities on local history, but I think I already know about as much as what they could tell me, unless there is someone there who is a historian who maybe at some point in the past had interviewed previous park workers about the statue and could maybe have a secondhand account. And so there are a few leads to pursue, but it's going to take time. And for today, I just wanted to let you know that this statue existed, or at least it once existed, and it could possibly still exist out there today. We can only hope. Even if it's just a torch. Could you imagine if we found the torch from the original wood-carved model of Lady Liberty? How amazing would that be, even if it was just a torch? But it's entirely possible that the entire statue still exists intact. And yes, it's going to be vandalized. It's going to have some people's initials carved into it. But at this point, that graffiti is over a half a century old and is just part of the history of the statue. So I wouldn't mind that at all. But yeah, ever since I discovered this, I've always wondered what happened to the original Statue of Liberty. And no matter how many people I ask, nobody seems to know. Only the very old people in this town even remember that the statue was even there. And when you mention it to them, it's almost like you're bringing back a memory from their childhood. They get excited to tell you about it, but no one knows what happened to it. And I really, really want to find out. So my best hope at the moment is to either find something in all of these old archives and logs, or else, if I'm lucky, maybe someone significant will see this video and pick it up, and the internet will internet, and we will find out what happened to that original statue once and for all. So that about wraps it up for my McKennan Park mystery. And granted, for some people, this might not be that big of a mystery or that important of a mystery. But for me, as someone who didn't grow up in this area and didn't know about these things, I find it amazing. I wondered instantly, how is it that I didn't learn about this in history class growing up in school? Because, yeah, it is local to the Sioux Falls area, But this statue was the model for one of our national symbols. And you would think that this would be something that everyone across the country would know about. And in fact, a lot of people who grew up here in town don't even know about it. So to me, this is not only a link to the past, but a link to the art world, a link to one of the most famous sculptors in history. And it's tied to this local area. And I just find it I find it disturbing, I will say, that the city could have just thrown this thing away, and I'd like to believe that that's not what happened to it, that it's in the back of someone's garage, or it's stored away, or even on display in someone's backyard. Who knows what could happen to it? And I would really like to find out. So that was the purpose of today's video, is just to introduce the fact that there used to be a statue of incredible historic significance in this park, and one day in the 1960s it was just gone, and we don't know where it went or what happened to it. So that's about it. Other than that, we got out today. This is 13 weeks in a row. I'm really excited about that, because if this was a TV show, that would be one whole season one behind us. So 13 weeks, I've got good habits laid. So now I'm going to start focusing on my skills, on my editing, my presentation, my filming, things that will really make my videos better, because I have good solid habits laid now. But yeah, 13 weeks in the book. It was a nice day, beautiful weather. It was about 92 degrees today, but this park is very shaded, so it feels like it's about 75. Absolutely beautiful weather. I don't know what it's like in the middle of June where you're from, but here in Sioux Falls, the weather is incredible. So yeah, we got out. Next week's video. Next week, I am a little bit unsure, because I just have so many options ahead of me. I still want to do the sculpture walk. I still have to go plant the seeds of a legend in Brandon. I still want to go back to Lake Benton to see if I can find the Snyder cabin. And even though I gave you a really good tour of the Pipestone National Monument, I didn't show you the downtown area. And downtown Pipestone is actually very incredible and has its own rich, unique history. So I have all of these places that I want to show to tie up the loose ends before I move on to something new. So I need to get that done. And next week, it's going to be one of those videos, or it's going to be something else. I don't know. Haven't decided yet. And the only way you're going to know is to tune back in next Wednesday at 1. Until then, thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. Don't forget to tap the subscribe button below. I'll see you Wednesday. Quackers out.